A lot of survival kits are either so small that you can barely fit the essentials in, or so big that the chances are you're going to leave it at home. So finding a pouch that you can fit all those important items for fire, water purification, emergency lighting, all that sort of thing, but it will fit into a small enough pouch that it could be put into a day sack or even in your pocket. The pouch itself is a knockoff version of a Maxpedition 5x3 pocket organizer, which is a really well designed pouch. It has these molly loops here so you can fit it to plate webbing or any kind of backpack or anything that uses the molly system. Zip covers 3/4 of the way around, so you've just got a little attachment point which allows it to open like a book, and you've got a mesh pocket at the front here so you can keep things that you might want to keep separate from the items inside. And here we have the contents of the pouch, and in order to stick with the principles of the survival rule of threes, we're going to start with shelter. So in extreme weather conditions you can only survive for 3 hours without shelter, so that makes sense to talk about this one first. And here we have a mylar sheet, which is a reflective space blanket which will help to reflect radiant heat back to your body. They're not very good on their own, but if you combine them with something like this plastic poncho, it becomes quite a useful shelter system. And then we can add to the effectiveness of that by using the tea light candles, which can be used inside the poncho to create a heat source and help you to survive a night. So that's something we'll cover in a separate video. Now we'll move on to fire, which also helps to keep us warm. And we'll start off on this side. Here we have a fire steel, a pretty neatly set up piece. There you go, some pretty decent sparks off that. Moving over to the other side, we have a Bic lighter. Just a really good, compact little fire lighting source, and these work really, really well. And then we have the Hamero fire card or tinder card, which is a great way to light a fire in just about any weather conditions. Moving on, we have a cutting tool in the form of the Victorinox Tinker. Swiss Army knives, I think, have their place in any survival kit because they're just so useful, especially a good quality one like a Victorinox or Wenger. And this Tinker model has some useful features. So we'll start off, we have 2 blades, well, large and a small. And they're a decent steel, they take a good edge and they work very well. We also have a saw blade, and despite their very small size, these will cut through wood, plastic, pretty much anything like that, anything that you might need to cut through. Not ideal for firewood, it's a little bit small, but could be useful for all sorts of craft tasks and things like that. Then we move on to the bottle opener. You know, if you're lucky enough to have some bottles with you, that'll come in handy. And you have a little wire stripper down at the base here. Of course, the flathead screwdriver on there as well. Moving over to the tin opener. And if you've never opened a tin with a Swiss Army knife tin opener, you haven't lived, because they are superb, actually better than just about any other kind of tin opener. And so that's a really good, useful tool there. Plus we have a smaller flathead screwdriver at this point here. And that's everything from the main section. So if you flip it over, we have a Phillips head screwdriver here, which is quite a useful size. And at the base of that, just tucked away, we have a pin. So that can be handy for getting splinters out or anything else along those lines. Another useful tool is this one here. I'll push this one back down as we've already seen it. This is the awl, which is really useful for making holes in wood or leather or fabric or anything like that. And you can use it also to stitch using this hole here. So very useful features there. And then we have a tiny tweezers, which is great for getting splinters out or removing ticks, that sort of thing. And then the ever useful toothpick. So that's pretty much everything. So it doesn't have as many features as some Swiss Army knives, but it has all the most important ones. So a really useful tool to have in any survival kit or EDC kit. Next we move on to water purification. So here we have a Ziploc bag holding 3 1 litre Wazoo survival gear water bags. And then we also have some 1 litre Oasis water purification tablets. So how many do we have here? So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So that's 10 litres of purified water, which should be good for any short-term emergency. Now we have 2 options for torches. We have the large here and a smaller one. Now both of these have the batteries reversed, so they're not likely to turn on accidentally and drain. And the idea is that this one's really suitable for navigation. It's a more powerful torch. I forget exactly how powerful this is, but this very compact one is small enough to hold in your teeth. So it's great for map reading or just doing those little tasks around in the night that you might need to do. So good to have 2 torches. 2 is 1, 1 is none. The credo of all survivalists and preparedness types. Next we have signaling and navigation. So navigation, we have a Polymath Products mini glow compass, and these are surprisingly good. It's a liquid filled compass. It's very stable. You can see I can move this around and it goes to position very, very quickly, and then it steadies. So that is a really good button compass. I mean, with button compasses you can get some very poor ones that aren't even worth including, but the Polymath product ones are really very good. So that's a good one. Then I have a cheap whistle, cheap and cheerful, but it works very well. So that's a good audible signal. And then over here we have a little piece of reflective plastic mirror, and this will work as a signaling device for visible signals in the daytime. So this can be used to reflect sunlight towards a potential rescuer. Could be used at a distance of several miles, so it's a very effective method of signaling. Now we have some of the most useful of all survival equipment, gaffer tape. So it's just wrapped around a little gift card, but there's quite a few meters of gaffer tape or duct tape here, and that can be used for all sorts of repairs, even for first aid. Some people say that this actually has antiseptic properties, so it can be used as a wound dressing, and it's flammable, so it can be used as a fire lighter as well. So it's great for repairs, great for holding everything together, just the perfect emergency material to keep in any kit. A healthy human can live for 3 weeks or more without food. So food isn't really a major priority in a survival situation, but it's a nice to have, which is why I've included this little fishing kit here. So it's in a little plastic container, and on the outside we have some 6-pound fishing lines, monofilament fishing line, and that's held in place with a rubber ranger band, which can also be used for fire lighting and all sorts of other tasks. So inside this cylinder we have a few interesting items. So starting with these float stops, which are used in conjunction with the floats themselves. I'll just try and wiggle these out of here. There we go. So I'll chuck everything there and I'll talk about it now. So here we go. So the fishing kit itself is made up of several component parts, and these are all designed to be used to make an emergency fishing rod. So you can cut a small piece of hazel or willow using the saw on our Swiss Army knives, and then we can use all the component parts of this, like the safety pins, which can be bent into eyes, and then we also have this little eye here that we can use as one of the main eyes for the rod as well. So all of these components can be very useful for making up an emergency fishing rod. Otherwise you might just use a hand line. And then in here we have our floats, which are made from earplugs, and I've just put a little piece of biro tube down the inside. So it's an empty biro tube, and that goes through the center, which is where the fishing line will go. And then these float stops go at either end to stop the line from moving one way or the other. We have a weighted plumb bob here, which is put onto one of the hooks, and this can be used to gauge the depth of the water, so that's a useful thing to have. And we have a whole load of different size split shot for weighing the fishing rigs, depending on how you're using it, off the bottom or as a float. And the finished fishing eyes that are made from the safety pins will end up looking like that. So quite an easy thing to do, something to pass the time in a survival situation. Most survival situations only last a few days anyway, so it's quite unrealistic that you'd need to do much fishing, but it's good to do that. And then we have some size 14 fish hooks, which are quite small, but you can catch big fish on a small hook, but you can't catch small fish on a big hook, so it makes sense to carry a load of small hooks. And these are taped to a piece of sticky tape here, and then there's a paper layer so you can just take the individual hooks out as you need them. And that's pretty much it. So we've just got a whole load of bits and bobs in here to make up our fishing kit. So that's the basic kit. You can always add to it, or you can remove items and put different items in, but it's good to have a real basic core system that you can work from. One thing I probably would add is some paracord, a few meters of paracord, because you can use paracord as it is. 550 paracord is incredibly strong, and you can also break it down by removing the outer part and revealing the 7 inner strands. Now those can be used as fishing line, you can use them for snares, you can use them for all sorts of tasks. You can even use them as dental floss. So a very useful thing to include in any survival kit would be some paracord. I would also, if I had a little bit of extra space, I might put some emergency food, some high calorie food, something along the lines of glucose tablets, maybe even some chocolate. And that would pretty much complete my kit. So that's the contents of my compact survival kit. Now I'll be interested in hearing what you'd put in your kit. Is there anything that I've put in here that you wouldn't include? Just let me know, comment down below. And I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our weekly content, which is uploaded every Saturday at 1 p.m. UK time. I'll see you next time.